Welcome to the Evolution of Aloha podcast with me, Dr. Jerry Ibalarosa Tanel. Now let's talk story. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Evolution of Aloha podcast, a Plumline production. I am your host, Dr. Jerry Ibalarosa Tanel. Today, we're going to be talking with Sonya-Prajna Patrick, a death or end of life doula located here in Western Washington. So excited to hear your story. But before we get started, one of the first things that I like to do is honor the land in which our feet stand. And I will begin by acknowledging that those of us who are gathering in the Seattle area, we are on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial. We respect this place and honor the sacred spiritual connection to the land, water, and its people, past, present, and future. And by acknowledging these lands and their original indigenous inhabitants, we reach back to our own indigenous roots and reflect on the impacts of colonialism from the lands and the lands from which all our people come. We're connected to our ancestors through this connection to land, for the land is what connects us all. So please join me in taking a moment to honor the land of the traditional people in the territory in which you stand. And today I honor the Tulalip tribes and allied bands for the enduring care and continuous protection of the land where I currently reside. So thank you so much, Sonya.
Hello, and I would like to honor the Snohomish tribes in which my home is on. So I would like to just start off, if I may, calling in just a sacred circle to honor the space that we're in. Savole ahale ahale, savole ahale ahale, savole ahale ahale, savole ahale. We call in the spirit of the North and the keepers of the North. We thank you for this time to be able to gather. We ask that you're with us to give us rootedness in Mother Earth, that we are sheltered and cradled, and that we can learn to care for the earth, that we can be strong and as massive as the mountains, but as flexible as the wind and the leaves. We ask that the spirit of North walks with us to East. Hello, East. East is the morning sunrise, the dew on the grass. East is the communication between spirit world and physical world. We ask that the spirit of East gathers with us, that we can have clear communication, that we can understand what needs to be said, and that we can reach and touch people's hearts. We ask that the spirits of North and East join us in the South at the ancestors' heart, where Jerry's ancestors, my ancestors, and whomever is listening to this podcast gather in laughter and in joy and in celebration of life, the past life, the present life, future life. And we ask that the fires burn away any obstacles that prevents us from reaching that place of joy, whatever our definition of joy and peace may be. We ask for inspiration at this time. We ask that the spirits of North, East, and South go with us to West, where the ancestors rest, where the bones of the ancestors nourish Mother Earth, where the bones of the ancestors knows where our truth lie, where our blood is. We ask that the spirits of the West work with us with the beautiful phases of the moon, and that the ebbs and flows of the ocean can wash away and cleanse us at the same time. And we just ask that everyone meets us in the upper world, where wherever our definition of peace and heaven may be, to meet us down in the underworld where the mysteries and the shadows and the spirit of death resides, to meet us in the middle world where we can humbly come together in this special and sacred time. And we disinvite any beings, thoughts, and feelings that will not be a benefit of this sacred time and space. And we ask that you go out of this sacred space where you can serve and better be served. And we thank the keepers of the land to allow us to be here. And so it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Me.
Oh,
Thank
absolutely. Wouldn't it be amazing if every organization, every institution would greet the morning, would greet each other the way that we just did?
Yes, it would be. And I know in Hawaii, you greet each other so lovingly, you know. We're all not strangers.
Right.
But we try to say that we are because of the differences. But if we all greeted the morning, greeted ourselves.
Yes.
Like I look in the mirror and I go, good morning, beautiful, even when I don't feel beautiful, right? Because if you greet yourself with love and joy, your body radiates that love and joy for the rest of the day. And then you go out and say, like, may my smile or may my twinkle in my eyes be of assistance to people. Because sometimes you don't have to say anything. You can just wish that.
Yep. Right. And then it's like that energy that we have, you know, like in Hawaii, we call that energy mana. And so when we greet ourselves and we aloha ourselves, then we're able to go out and share aloha with the world. And people can feel that. Yeah. People can feel that energy. So sometimes, you know, it's like when we talk about that energy, it's like, you know, saying aloha to someone, but then yet the energy is not giving that aloha.
Yes. Yeah.
Ancestors know. They're like, ooh, the mouth is saying one thing, but the spirit is saying something else.
Yes. And if you greet yourself like that in the morning, you're also greeting your ancestors. So then your ancestors come and walk with you. And like you said, they give you that message and say, you know what, you can say hi, you can be loving, but like, stop it there. Don't give any more information. Just listen. Just observe. Yep.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about what does it mean? I know that, tell me more about being a death doula.
So the process is different for everyone, right? I feel that you're called to be a death doula though. Something happens and shifts in your life that you might not even know that that's what it is, but you recognize death. That's the only way I can describe it. And it's not in a way like, oh gosh, that person's going to die, or, you know, like something creepy, like the death tarot card or something. Right. It's just that experiences in life has put you through a process of death. Right. And one thing that people don't understand about death is we all could be death doulas, right? First of all, let me back up. First of all, our ancestors knew how to care for the dying and be a part of that process. And then somehow we like gave it over to companies and everything, right? But we all have experienced death, even our ancestors, right? And so things can happen in our life that we don't consider death. Like a relationship ends and you grieve, it's death. A friendship ends and it's death. You love your town, but something happens and you got to uproot and move, and all your memories, that's death. So a lot of times people appear to be afraid of death, but we actually are walking with death on a daily basis. We just don't call it that. We're like, I broke up with my partner. I got fired from my job. And then people don't expect you to grieve in the same manner that you would if an actual loved one passed. But we do grieve. And so being a death doula, and I'm also like a spiritual counselor. So I kind of like help people realize, well, gosh, you're going through a mourning stage right now because your finances are at a very bad space. So let's work from there and move up to rebirth, right? So death can be anything. But when you perceive death, it comes rebirth afterwards. So it's like straddling that finite line between death and rebirth.
Well, that is so that is so interesting, because a lot of times when we, I mean, for myself, thinking about death, it's final. That's it. And then there's that fear of that. And then also it's like, not the way that you explained it is, we're able to, I mean, just you talking about the death of a relationship, divorce, right? The death of friendships, it just was not working anymore. But when you talk about walking alongside with death, there's this sacred connection to it, and the rebirth of something new. And we never think about that. So that's interesting. What brought you into this work?
So interestingly, I thought about it. It's really weird, and I'm going to go woo-woo for just a moment. But a lot of my female presenting family members, we can see ghosts, and we see their spirits and things. And so when I was like in my 30s or so, I was talking to my dad and found out my dad does too. And that my dad believes that his, I think, great grandfather was 100% Blackfoot. And he was the person that helped the medicine of his community. And so my dad and I were talking, and come to find out, both of us experience spirits and see them and interact with them. And I thought I was weird because I could see someone standing there, right? But through the course of my life, I told you before this started, I have been in so many car accidents and have almost like passed away that it's amazing that I'm here, right? Not in car accidents, but the chances of it is what I mean. Yeah. And when I was about 8, I almost drowned in a lake. And I'm sitting here at 50, and I still remember like being in the water, floating, seeing the like stuff underneath the water, and spirits. So our angels just push me up and says, Sonya, it's not your time. And they push me up, wave your hands, and I'm waving my hands. I go back down and I could see everything. It was almost like I could breathe underwater, which was so weird. And I went down and up 3 times. And finally, a friend of the family saw me, and my spirits were like, Sonya, Dorothy's coming. Just hang on. We're going to keep pushing you up. And she got me. And from that moment on, my life shifted. And so I could start like kind of interacting and seeing spirits more. And it was like kind of freaking me out because I didn't tell my mother. My mother is missionary Baptist, right? And I'm already weird with my piercings and tattoos from my mom's perspective. But talking to my dad in my 30s, he was like, let me help you to understand this, right? So I ended up here because working in skilled nursing facilities, I would see a person and spirit would go, they're not going to be here tomorrow. Sit with them for a minute. And I'd sit there. And then next day they had passed. So I feel that from that moment when I almost drowned, I kind of became a companion to death. And I don't say that and I don't interact with that, but I can feel it. I mean, I can see like, ooh, that house, it's dying. And then next know it's torn down. So it's just really weird that I get messages, but I can be sane, and hold a conversation. But I also can tell like if a house is dying, if the land is dying, if people around me are dying. And so it's a real tricky situation.
Right.
To be able to interact with death.
Well, one of the things is I don't see what you explained as woo-woo at all.
Hey.
Because that's the colonized way, right? When we are able to step into our ancestral knowledge, then of course colonizers are going to look at it and like, oh, that's just woo-woo and everything. So your story about drowning in a lake when you were 8, I was 8 years old when I almost drowned.
Ooh, a chicken skin. Ooh, wow.
Yeah. And I was at a summer fun, and it was like with a Catholic school. My family,
And I was at a church function.
Oh, okay. That was it. It was summer fun during a, a Catholic, Catholic summer fun. And there's you lived in Hawaii. So in Waikiki, do you remember the natatorium?
Okay.
Okay, so in Waikiki, there's a natatorium where it's a saltwater pool, and it's like, just from the ocean, right? There's this area. And I fell in. And I remember going down and down and down. And it was dark. It was dark for a second, but then there are all these lights. And I literally felt myself being lifted up. And then I could see, as I was looking up, I could see people, right? There other 8-year-olds, like they don't know what to do, right? It's like I fell into the water. And I remember looking up, and there was this hand that actually reached down, and I grabbed the hand, but when I got up, there was nobody there. It was other kids, and they were like all screaming. And then the adults came running and everything, and then lifted me up out of the pool.
Wow.
And so I will always remember that. And I would always say that I was an empath because I could feel other people's energies, and I could walk into a home and I could feel if there was something that was not right. And I could just feel it, right? And I'm like, ooh, I feel something. And people used to tell me that, oh my God, you're just so, you're so woo-woo. You're so woo-woo.
You're so weird. Yeah.
You're so weird. And, it's like, how can you do that? Or how can you feel that? But I just could. And so it's like, you're talking about how we all could be these death doulas. Yeah. It feels like there's a part of our psyche that we're just not tapping into.
Yeah. And I believe, like, my death doula instructor, and I agree, it should be a discussion from preschool all the way up. And it could be a gentle introduction of, like, if an animal passed away,
Right.
or if you see an animal on the side of the road, saying a prayer for that animal, just leading all the way up to, even adults, we need education on death because we're so afraid of it, which is funny because we're all going to die. So if we're afraid of it, there's avoidance. So that means, do we have our wills in place? Do we have our advanced directives in place? Those things that we're so fearful of, if we don't tackle them head on and say, I'm going to live my life, even though I'm planning for a good death, a sacred death, then it leaves our families high and dry. Like, what did they want to be dressed in? What did they want to have their music like? What? Oh, I don't know. And then it puts the responsibility onto our family members, and it might hurt them even more because they're trying to mourn instead of, if we pre-plan, it becomes a celebration that they're like, oh, wow, we can celebrate. But one thing through all of this that has come to me, especially through, like, my certification training, we have to do a lot of deep meditation. And I heard Spirit say, death cries when he shows up. Because death has watched us progress and change and grow. And then now death has to take us wherever our perceived home is, right? Take us back to source. So death cries when death shows up.
How do you have these conversations? Because conversations like this can be so difficult for people, and we just don't want to talk about it. So how do you engage in these conversations?
So sometimes I'm like, so I'm taking a death doula class, or, oh, I'm a death doula. People kind of know me as a person because in community, I'm a bone reader. And so people come to me for reading bones, and usually bones are associated with death, right? It's a form of divination, just like tarot or the runes or what have you. But most of the people know me as like the bone witch, is what they call me in community. And so it's really easy once people find out I read bones, then like, oh my gosh, what kind of bones are those? And then people might, oh, I'm scared to death, and then that conversation leads into it, right? Other times it's just if someone says, oh, I had a loved one pass, and then I'll say, oh, it's a beautiful thing. It's a celebration of life, and then kind of lead into a conversation that way. Because it can be a touchy subject. But if we had it like how you and I are talking, it doesn't have to be a whole, 30, 40 minutes of death conversation. It could just be, like if a person breaks up with their significant others and say, I'm really sorry for this moment of death that you're experiencing. Your mourning is fine. It's natural. Grieve however you feel the need to grieve.
Right.
Sorry for the loss of your job. It's a death, and so then if we make it more natural in naming it, it becomes part of our conversations without having to walk into a place and say, y'all, let me tell y'all about death today.
Right.
I'm here to talk about death.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's shifting that narrative on how we look at things when something ends. And then how do because it's like it's what happens afterwards, right? It's like if you have a death of a loved one, it's what happens afterwards. How do you pick things up? Death of, a divorce, how do you pick things up? Do you have conversations with people on what happens afterwards?
I try if they're open to it, right? I've had people come, we'll just say like my loved one passed away, and say like, well, what did your loved one like to do? Oh, they loved chocolate and they loved rum. So then I just ask, well, do you have a place in your home that like maybe you can get a beautiful like handkerchief or a beautiful plate? And how about you put a piece of chocolate on there and put a cup of like a glass of rum and put their picture and a candle. And every day, just take a moment and go to that one spot and say, hey, Auntie, or hey, the person, and just acknowledge and let that be the acknowledgement for them. That's the most simple thing for a person because it puts it outside of them and it puts them at a place where you can sit there and like talk to that loved one, interact with that loved one, and just have them still part of the space. I personally don't feel that when our loved ones pass, that they leave us. They're around, they become our ancestors, they become our guides. And through whatever it means it may be, they're there to assist you. If you have one of those aunties that passed away that took no bull from nobody, and you're in a situation where you have to feel protected, call on that auntie to walk beside you and like, I need help right now. Like, I don't want to have to like deal with this. And auntie will show up and be like, I'm here. What we go do? Let me take over. And so our ancestors, even the loved ones that passed, are here to help us, right? They become we become part of them and they become part of us. So they're always walking with us.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that brings in that sacredness of death, is that we're living in this realm, but there are other realms where they ascend to, and they are still watching over us. I mean, as I'm talking about it, I can feel the energy of my ancestors. They never leave, and I think for a long time, because I never had this kind of conversation about death. When my parents passed away, for a long time, I had this sense of loss. I had this sense of, they're not here anymore. I cannot talk to them, but then it's like one morning I woke up and looked in the mirror, and the eyes that was looking back at me was was the eyes of my parents.
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh, wait a minute. They are still here.
Yes. And they also, like, haven't you all experienced something where you're walking and like sometimes I'll smell a smell and I'm like, I smell tobacco. And I'm like, Grandpa, you're here. Oh my gosh, hi.
Yes.
Because my grandpa, he dips tobacco. He was a Southern person. And so like I'll get a whiff of that, right? But our ancestors also come and visit us through strangers. Like somebody might say something to you that maybe your mom said, and you're like, whoa, like my mom would have said that. And then it's a message coming through. So I feel ancestors will approach us after death in ways that are most accepting to us. Like some people might say, oh, I'm going to be a butterfly. Every time you see a butterfly, you'll know it's me. So
Mm-hmm.
then when you see a butterfly, you should acknowledge the ancestor, whoever it may be, like, oh, mom, thank you so much for coming to visit. I'm okay, or I miss you, but I'm going to be okay, right? So just acknowledging that spirit, even when we pass, we go somewhere else, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have the option of being ancestors. We have the option of being able to help the earth and the people that remain, right? Sometimes we don't see that, and everyone's beliefs are different. But we go to a place where I think we assist people.
Yeah. Yeah. I can, I can see that. And, it's like, I feel that we have this connected energy through DNA,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like it's sometimes I feel that, okay, it may be invisible. It's something that we don't see, but it's definitely something that we feel. And, and a lot of times, in our Western European culture, a lot of times we hear, oh, you know what, it's emotions, right? It's emotional. You can't really, you can't depend on your feelings because it's just emotion. But I feel that's the heart, that is the gut, that is the soul connecting to something that we can't see, but we know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's moments where even in our dreams, right? It's like, how do you explain that? It's like, I have dreams, and it's not all the time, but there's times where when I really need it, when ancestors know I really need it, my mom, my dad, my grandma, my grandparents will come into my dream. And it would be like sitting there and just talking with them. A couple of years ago, I had a dream that I was with my grandmothers and my mother in the garden. And we were just having a conversation about, what I needed to plant, what seed was I planting, how is it going to grow, what's the impact of that. But it was, I came, when I woke up, I'm like, there's a message in there. What words am I planting into the young ones that we serve?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's my responsibility to that? And it's like, oh, thank you, ancestors.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's interesting on how you're connecting death to something that is not what we're used to. When we think about death, it's something that's final, it's the end, we'll never get back there again. But I mean, I don't know. Tell me more. I want to know more.
So, it is scary when death rolls around and comes and visits me as Sonya-Prajna. I won't be Sonya-Prajna anymore, but I'll be something else. I'll be someone else. I'll be a different being, right? Until I decide, oh, I guess I'll go back to this earth, or, we have so many galaxies that we don't even know. Maybe, I'll pick
Mhm.
galaxy beyond, right? And then be like, I want to be over there and be perceived as the alien, because we
Mhm.
consider other galaxies aliens. But yeah, we we can look at it as finite because we don't know. We're living in this dimension, even though there's so many more dimensions. And who's to say there's not another dimension where Jerry is and where Sonya is that's totally will pick up from where we left off, right? And continue the cycle of our soul, right? And so, especially if like people have religious beliefs, if you believe that there is a God or a goddess or Buddha or whomever, why couldn't we just emerge with them until it's time to do the next phase, right? We all have the ability to ascend, I think, to whatever that ascension looks like in our minds or what we believe, right? To not negate anybody's religious beliefs, because that's what gets us, believe it or not, gets us to try to come to a place of agreement with death and how it might look, you know? And so,
and we have this, you know, I mean, it's like the vision that we have of death that was given to us is, you know, this scary person with a cape and, you know, what is that, a sickle or, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and we're coming for you. And it's like, it's scary. It's, I mean, it's like, I feel that, wow. So, but the way that you explain that death cries when it's our time, you know, I mean, it's starting to shape shift in my head on what death actually looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wonder, you know, death has to have assistance too. Those angels that block us to prevent us from dying early, right? Like me last night in my car wreck, right? Something's there to say it's not your time. You must keep living, you know? And so, and when it's time, they go, okay, death, you know, it's that time, you know, and then I'm sure some kind of consultation goes on to say like, could there be a little bit more time, you know, because we do that to ourselves. Please give this person a little bit more time. I didn't have time to say bye. Please give me a little bit more time because I have regrets, right? Death probably has the same thing with their assistants, his assistants, and they're like, okay, like, and then they say, and I know when my uncle passed away years ago, I knew with our last conversation, I was like, oh, he's not going to be here much longer. And so, and like I don't know other people, but Southern people believe, you know, when you're going to die. And so you start clearing the nest, you start saying your goodbyes, you start giving away things and everything because they have a feeling that they're dying, right? And so death gives that extra time before death comes, right? Yeah.
And there's so many different ways to experience death. So have you thought about, I mean, especially in our society right now with what happened in Uvalde, Texas, what happened in Buffalo, you know, it's like the continuous murder of our Black and brown men. What are some of your thoughts on that in regards to death?
First of all, it's very heartbreaking, you know, because I have a male presenting 20-year-old that doesn't look 20, you know, so I live in fear for them all the time. Their pronouns are they, them. I question this. I heard once a long time ago when I started my spiritual path that when we come to this earth, this is where we are, what we consider earth, we pick our experiences. We choose, we have this pre-life review, sit down with our ancestors and the council, and they say, so what do you want to do when you go to earth? You know, well, I want to be Sonya. When I'm 30, I'm going to change my name to Sonya-Prajna, you know, and I'm going to have one child. And, you know, like you plan this out. And then you also plan out those kinks, because those little kinks are what makes us grow, right? Because if not, the idea of reincarnation and repeating could happen. So you're like, okay, I want to experience a breakup. I want to experience an amputation. I want to experience like all these things, right? So I can't help but wonder if the people that are dying at the hands of guns, like they have been, if those group of people did not choose that path to help wake us up, to stir the pot, to stir the cauldron, to have all that ickiness boil up to the surface and come out so that we can do something about it, right? And that's the only thing I can think of. So sadly, did that person choose to take that moment to take their gun into that place? Because that person would have had to play a role in that as well, right? That's a hard concept for my brain to wrap around, because like we all experience hardship and trauma and things. And it's like, but why would we elect to do that? And then there's other times we could just be at the wrong place at the wrong time, sad to say, right? That it takes us to a new path of changing and growing to put something in us. But I'm just thinking that is to wake people up, to realize that there needs to be assistance with mental health. There needs to be more safety in schools. There needs to be less prejudice. There needs to be more understanding. You know, just because you and I may not look alike does not mean we don't have similar experiences. You know, our organs are in the same place. Our blood is in this flowing through us. So just because our skin or the way we present ourselves is different should not cause so much pain and hurt in the world, right?
Right.
Slowly but surely, it seems like people are waking up, right? The pandemic, more than anything, woke us up.
Yeah.
You had to spend more time with yourself. And I'm hoping that as it comes out and we come out in community more, that people have more time for self-reflection and how they want it to change and how they want to grow and how they want to help others, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think about, it's like, looking at death in the way that you describe as something that we walk beside all the time, every day. And then also thinking of how having this conversation before we come to this place on earth. And, what is our purpose? What is our destiny? And, it's like thinking back, way, way, way back, on how society have decided, or white men have decided, that whiteness was going to be the supreme race. Yeah. And then everything that comes after that, right? It's like, I just feel that everything that has happened around death in our society in this past couple of years has to do with white supremacy. I've just got to call it out like that.
Yeah.
Right?
The entitlement, right?
Yes.
The entitlement. And that's really sad when you come from an entitled place, because then you can't understand people. You will not understand people, right? Until something happens that makes you shift, right? And sometimes, sadly, there's not a lot of shifting going on with the entitlement of the world. If anything, they act like they're trying to go backwards, taking away a woman's rights, really? Like, this is my perceived body, not yours. I am not property. And so there's a form of slavery still going on that people are not calling it that. But when a white person can tell anybody else what they can and cannot do, even their fellow female white counterparts, that's a form of slavery. It's a form of oppression, and like, people need to call it out for that, for what it is. You are trying to be my master.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I own my own body.
Exactly. It's like I talk a lot about decolonization, and it's like I base my work on an elder, Pokala Inui in Hawaii, who is an activist, and he's also an attorney on the 5 phases of decolonization. And so the 5 phases, the first phase is rediscovery and recovery. And so talking with you about that, the rediscovery and recovery of our connection to the ancestors. Yes. And then also rediscovering and recovering, like earlier you were talking about how our ancestors dealt with death in a way that is different than how we deal with death. So rediscovering and recovering. So that's the first phase. The second phase is mourning. Is part of it. The mourning is it's part of who we are as human beings. We learn how to become more compassionate, more empathetic when we come to this place of mourning. And so, talking about what has happened in our society with all of these, mass shootings and, brown and Black people being killed, right? It's like, it is a collective mourning when we can find that it is not just Black and brown people that need to heal, but our entire society needs to heal. Then we walk alongside mourning, we walk alongside death, and we're able to see it in more of a sacred way. So that's the second one. The third one is dreaming. It's like that connection to our ancestors through our dreams, and how we are actually given messages from our ancestors who have passed through dreams. And then it's our commitment.
I'm sitting here trying to look for a pen so I can write this down.
Girl, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you. You got to send it later, because I'm like, where's my pen?
And so the fourth phase of decolonization is commitment. And so our commitment to honoring and listening and remembering how our ancestors lived and how they've actually walked alongside and cherished and honored that moment of death. And then the fifth one is action. It's action. And it's now coming to this place where it's like, do we have to be afraid of death? Or is what's been given to us in growing up, being afraid of death? If we are able, like you're talking about, if we're able to act on the fact that we're all gonna die. Now, how are we gonna have a conversation about that? Right? I mean, it's like what you're doing is decolonizing death.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, because, like if we just start with planning, I know it's so scary, but like some people are environmentalists here. Like, do you know in Washington, like you can have the traditional burial, embalming, but you can have a green burial. You can have like cremation. You can have aquamation. You can make your body compost. So like there's so many options and so many beautiful rituals that you could do around death that it doesn't have to be scary, right? So like I want to have aquamation, right? Or
Tell me about that. What's aquamation?
So aquamation is kind of like they have this chamber of water that's balanced with so many like chemicals, and like they place your body in there, and then you can place degradable things in there. So I'm going to put bones in there with me, right? And then it takes so many hours, and then your body becomes clean, beautiful ashes. So like cremation, your body becomes ashes, but they're kind of gray or whatever. But cremation is also not so good for the environment. So aquamation is like a way of breaking down the body into ashes, right? Green burial is taking the body and cleaning it, washing it, putting a shroud over it. And then you can put flowers and herbs and things like that. And then they only bury you like I think 3 feet, and then you turn into, the earth, right? So you can do these different burials and do ceremony around it where family and friends can be involved. From the time of when a person passes, stop and pause, because that energy is leaving the body, going back home. Angels or whomever you believe in has come, and you got to acknowledge that that person's spirit is no more. And then you can wash the body, and then you can dress the body, then you can place it beautifully. And then, people probably don't even know you can have a home burial in Washington. You can have your body placed in your home with ice and the proper, procedures,
Right.
like make sure you get your proper licenses to and then people can come to your home. They can sing, they can dance, they can just do all these things to celebrate your life before they have to bury you, right? You don't have to go through the white person's traditional, let's embalm and get this $5,000 casket and just, that casket that might not even break down in Mother Earth that could cause some issues for land later on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Sonya, you're making me think so differently about death and the body, right? It's like, so growing up, I was always told that this is just a vessel. This is just a vessel. And when we do leave, when our body, when our soul and our spirit leaves this body, honor this body. This body has been doing a lot in how many years you are here on earth.
Yes.
So honor the body, honor this vessel. And so, hearing you talk about, the different ways of doing burial, it's like embalming it is abusive.
It is actually. It doesn't seem appealing. Through my course training, I was like, yep, not going to get embalmed. Nope, not going to do that. Yeah.
After everything your body has taken you through, and the experiences and the energy and the relationships that it has had in the time that you're here on earth, to just take it and embalm it doesn't sound very sacred. But the way that you talked about how you can actually do all of these beautiful ways of honoring this body, yes, is amazing. I went back home to Hawaii last month. We went back home to Hawaii, and a cousin of mine who her dad passed away, was my dad's first cousin, passed away 10 years ago. She held on to his ashes until she was able to bring him back to Hawaii. And we had canoes, and we went out into the ocean, and she laid his ashes into the waters where he swam, where he fished, where it was a place of sustenance for him. And it was so beautiful, to be able to do that and have the canoes out and have the elders up by the beach watching as we paddled his ashes out into the waters. That is beautiful. I mean, it's like, why do we not look at it that way? Right. And by talking this way and on how you're talking about decolonizing death, those people who are, selling those $5,000 caskets,
they're banking money off of you. It's like slavery again, right? It's like, if everything is broken down to like this simple, like, is it slavery or not? Is it taking advantage or not? Is it oppression or not? People would have a clearness about it, right? My recommendation is I'm still in the process of this as well, is like getting your advance directive. Like, what do you want to have done with your body? Do you want to be contribute your body to medical science? Do you want to, be kept alive for so long? Those things are important. If you sit down and plan out your advance directive, you also are planning your life, because then you're like, oh, shoot, my bucket list got 15 more things on it. I better do that because I'm sitting here planning a death, right? Like, even like I want to have a home funeral. So I'm trying to think of the process of like, what music do I want played? What essential oils do I want you to wash me with? What do I want to have dressed as? Like, what herbs do I want around me? Like, what do I want buried with me? All those things make it so much easy for your family too, and your friends. And then I want to have like a simple ceremony. I want to have drumming. I want to have singing, I just want to have this spiritual celebration. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to die tomorrow,
Right.
you know,
Right.
but, like, we're walking with death, but we're also walking with life. They're partnerships.
Yes.
Think about the seasons. Winter comes, we hibernate, we go in, Mother Earth dies for a little bit until
Right.
spring comes, right? So there's our rebirth. And think about those times when it's winter and we're hibernating. We get sad, we mourn, especially here in the Southwest, because it gets, in the Pacific Northwest, because it gets dark. And so we go through that mourning stage. We mourn as the seasons do, believe it or not. Spring is youth, like all those different phases. Winter is elderhood time, And so if we look at the seasons, and if we look at what the seasons go through, they always come back. So why wouldn't we? We just may not come back in this form.
Right.
But planning your death makes you live. It definitely does. And I'm not gonna lie, you cry, because I was like, what if I end up in a coma? How long do I want to live? So all those questions you do have to ask yourself, but it's better for you to make those decisions than for somebody else to make it.
Right.
Yeah, I personally would not want someone to keep me alive on a ventilator for 40 years because I'm not breathing anymore, because they can't let my body go. But if my advanced directive says you got 20 days or 20 weeks or whatever, if I'm brain dead, let me go, because I can go to my next place, right?
Yeah.
So if we live life like we're dying, then we would appreciate life more. We would be kinder. We would be kinder to ourselves and to other people if we were living like we were dying, which we should be, because our cells die and regenerate and all that stuff, right?
Right. And we are every day, we
Every
are
day.
dying. And so, but yeah, it's like that is one part where I feel that our brain has a block, right? We don't want to talk about that. We just want to talk about living. And if we talk about living, then we become careless because we feel like, okay, we're going to be here forever.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not.
And
so, yeah, I like that you say that if we lived, if we were dying, we would be a lot kinder to each other. And then, of course, there's all of those different elements, like you were talking about earlier about mental health. There are individuals, there are people out there that are suffering from mental health. And as we are here, it's like, what do we do? What do we do about that? How do we find ourselves in this place of living like we're dying? Do you talk about that with individuals?
It's so hard. Well, for the aspect of mental health, right? That's hard too, because people are feeling like they are dying and wanting to die,
right?
And so one thing that I would recommend for people that might be experiencing like really extreme depression where they feel like they're dying, please go get an MRI. Because my child, when they hit about 15, got really sad and really depressive and just really just night and day, like a switch turned off. And at the same time, they were complaining about eyes hurting, migraines, not being able to concentrate and things. And I thought they were in the IB program at their school, in a national baccalaureate program, getting college credits. I thought they were just overwhelmed, not getting enough sleep. Finally, the headaches got really bad that I was like, let's just take you to the doctor. And when they went to the doctor, they found out that they were born with a frontal lobe to cyst, and their frontal lobe manages your emotions and your feelings and things like that. And so they put the doctors put them on medication and everything, and they're now coming back around. So I would recommend going to have your doctor get your MRI just in case, because maybe something, the blood flow in the brain could be a little amiss, right? That is causing some issues. And then with mental health, I put everything on an altar, right? I have altars for like Native Americans getting their land back and being respected. I have altars for people that say, I need a house, I need a place to live, right? I have separate altars, but I do have collective altars too, for like Black Lives Matter and things like that, and mental health altars. I feel that if we build altars, like sacredness outside of our body, it makes us have the opportunity to heal our bodies instead of trying to keep everything in and everything we're experiencing on a daily, because the body can only hold so much before it shuts down.
Right.
And when you're holding a lot of, say, for instance, heartbreak, they say that's where heart attacks happen, right? If you're not standing up for yourself, you end up having stomach ulcers and things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put everything outside of you, it gives you a space to look at, to meditate, to write about, to try to work through and process through. And so, for my child, I was like, oh, you're experiencing these feelings. Can you set aside a place that you can write about your feelings, that maybe you can do art about your feelings? And so like my child is a jazz guitar player. So he sits in a certain spot and he will make music, right? And that gets him through. And so for mental health, what avenues can you do in the altar space that can help you kind of like work with it, right? Because mental health is it's an important aspect of a person, right? And it needs to not be denied. It needs to be the guides that work with that energy can come in and help. And sometimes you have to question, some aspects of mental health, is it that people are more psychic and they just don't know how to handle it?
Mm-hmm.
Are they more intuitive and they just don't know how to handle it? Like schizophrenia, I believe they probably are seeing ghosts and spirits that are talking to them.
Yep.
And they just don't have the boundaries to be able to say, yo, it's 2:00 in the morning, I need to go to sleep, because you can set boundaries with spirit. And so those things that people perceive as mental health, is it really power?
Yeah.
Untapped power, untrained power, inability to recognize and have the proper training, right? So there's aspects of that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's a lot of things that, that came up as you were talking about mental health. It's like being able to bring your child in for an MRI, right? There's some individuals that don't have access to that. The untrained, it's like with schizophrenia. When I hear people talk about schizophrenia, I'm thinking that's an untapped power, because I do believe in that as well too. Is that, can you imagine if there were spirits that was coming to you that did not have any boundaries? And there are spirits that will jump in and not abide by any boundary because it's open, right? It's an open field. That when you have all of these spirits coming to you and you're not able to rest, there's no resilience. You're sick because you're not sleeping, right? And so it's like, if you're able to train yourself, if you have the capacity and the ability and the resources to be able to train yourself, that is power that a lot of normal people that's walking around don't have.
Yeah. And that's one thing that as a spiritual counselor, like I teach boundaries, I teach protection, I teach about altars, I teach about awareness, and teach is the wrong word. I assist.
Yeah.
I assist, because whatever someone tells you, you take what resonates with you, right?
Yeah.
My truth is not your truth. Right? What works for me might not work for you. But then I help say, well, if this particular thing doesn't work, maybe try this, right? But it's really important to be able to find a trusted person, especially with mental health. And say, for instance, schizophrenia or depression. Those are probably maybe on the forms of some form of death. Maybe people are walking with death, and that's why they're so depressed, because they're feeling that they're empathic to what's going on, and don't have certain people to be able to talk to or connect with, right? Or the people that don't understand, that says, oh my God, pull yourself up from the bootstraps and keep going. Those people are irritating. They're very irritating, because we all experience, and I'm starting to feel that pandemic has made all of us experience some form of mental health. It's a matter of how much self-care we're giving, how much support we have, and who do we have that can be of guide or assistance to us, right? And sometimes communities aren't so they don't have as many resources, which is sad. And so I say fight for them.
Exactly.
When I go to my doctor, I'm like, I think this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong, this is wrong. What do you think? I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. What can you do to help me? But some people give their power over to the doctor, or give their power over to their therapist. When you say, this is where I want to be, this is where I envision myself, how can you get me there? You're supposed to assist me. How are you going to assist me?
Yeah.
And if we change our perspective and not look at a doctor as God,
yes,
and having all answers, and kind of attune into our bodies, it gives us more awareness in our ancestors. I walk with ancestors. I don't wake up and I don't go to bed without my ancestors, without thanking them, without asking them to show me. Even in my dream slate, I'm like, okay, whoever's in charge of, let's say, creativity, I want you, while I'm asleep, because we supposedly leave our bodies, right?
Yeah.
I want you to go find Picasso for me. Go have a conversation with Picasso about painting and bring that information back, please. Thank you very, very much. So you can ask for assistance from everything, minute things. Angels in charge of parking spots. Help me find a parking spot, because I don't want to walk far. Yeah, just ask for the assistance. And there are assistants in the spiritual realm that help with everything we're experiencing, from mental health to happiness to joy to creativity to self-love, all those things.
Yep.
And if we look at it as we have the resources, and then ask that if someone physically can represent that aspect to come into your life to help with positive changes, help as well, right?
And it happens, I know that there's a lot of people that have experienced things like that, right? It's like, just as simple as, I need a parking spot. And then there's one that's just right there. But we don't ever look at it as if the ancestors around us is helping us through this. Because I feel that, again, with colonization, there is a separation. There's a separation. Once the people that you love is gone, they're gone. They're no longer here. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so, because there is this energy that connects us and continuously connects us, even when they're no longer in this realm on earth. They're still connected. And that's where we tap into that ancestral knowledge, that ancestor way of being and knowing, is by connecting back to that. And of course, individuals who are listening to this podcast would be like, man, these two chicks are so crazy. They're all woo-woo and everything. It's like
they whack.
they're whack. They're talking about all of this stuff and everything. And it's because they don't understand. And so people that are listening to this podcast that feels like, what the hell are they talking about? It's like, pause. Just pause for a minute and ask yourself, what is my connection to my ancestors?
Yes.
What's my connection to the ancestors? Because a lot of times we look at other individuals, just like when we're looking at people that have what we think is mental health issues, we judge by what we think we know without actually pausing and thinking, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what would I be like if that was going on with me. It's like, I know that if, sometimes if you have this open field and you have no boundaries with the spiritual world, that they will come and they will just talk with you, because there's some spirits that are still troubled, that are still left with some trauma. And it's like that spirit wants to talk to someone like, I need you to deliver this message for me, so that way I can heal and I can move on. And so if there is an open vessel, that's where they're going to gravitate towards. But we don't think about things like that.
No. And in the spiritual world, when you're an empathic person on planet Earth, in the physical world, you feel things, you sense things. If you're intuitive, even if you pick up a book on intuition, guess what? Your beam of light just went out into the spiritual world and you became a beacon. And here comes all the spirits sitting there waiting to be like, oh, I wonder if they're going to like wake up enough for me, open up enough for me to talk to them, right? Because I'm here. And so we got spirits around us all the time. It's just a matter of judging it and like saying when to say something, when not to say something. And boundaries are important. I've been in situations where spirits go like, you need to tell this person, blah, 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 blah. And I'm having a conversation like I'm having with you. And I'm like, yeah, no, we're not doing that right now. Yeah, we are, blah, 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 blah. No, we're not doing that right now. Because most of the time it's with total strangers. And those psychic shows where people just walk up to you and be like, your ancestors say blah, blah, blah. That drives me nuts. That's not respectful of ancestors and giving a person's permission, to say something. So you have to be very cautious as these skills open up and develop. You got to have boundaries with the spiritual world. You got to have boundaries with yourself, because as you gain more knowledge, it's not your place to go out. I do not brag. I do not boast. I have a doctorate degree. I only step up as Dr. Patrick when you are messing with my child. Here I come, or if I have to like prove because I'm a BIPOC female presenting person that I'm smart, and all of a sudden you look at me and think I'm not because I'm tattooed and pierced. Oh, I'm Dr. Patrick. So you have to be able to have boundaries and know your boundaries. But as Dr. Patrick, I'm not going to walk around going, oh gosh, I'm a spiritual counselor. Let me tell you what's right and what's wrong in your life and da da da. And the ancestors are telling me, oh, it's spirits telling me. Yeah, that's a disservice to the spirit world, because I think sometimes they want to relay messages that are very important, that are healing for them, like you said previously, or for the continuation of our line. So when people say, after I die, there's nothing more, then what are ancestors? Because when you die, you become an ancestor. So how can there be no more, right? Like, when does the line actually end for ancestors, right? Unless like you are literally the last living person in your bloodline, And yes, your ancestor line may die, but who's to say it won't not regress, but like change direction and
Right.
hook on to another path. And then there goes the other aspect of you, right?
Right. Especially if you are a mentor or a teacher or someone who cared for it. So for example, it's like my husband doesn't have any biological children,
Okay.
but his impact and how he lives his life with, my sons who are his sons and, our grandchildren is going to have an impact. And so it's like, sometimes he and I will have conversations where he's like, when I'm gone, I'm gone. And I'm like, no, because your impact and everything that you have been doing for our grandchildren, you are their grandfather.
Yes.
And that is what they will remember. That is what is going to become part of who they are as individuals.
As ancestors.
Yes. I said, so you're being a good ancestor. And so, it's like, there's so many different ways of looking at what it means to be a good ancestor. And I'm sure you read Layla Saad's book, right?
I haven't. What is it?
She wrote the book on actually white supremacy and me, on how to be a good ancestor.
Look, I'm looking for my pencil.
Yeah. I'll send that to you.
There's another one you have to sing. So I'm like,
yeah, and it's a great book. But we are all going to be ancestors one day. And so what is it that we want to, how do we want to be a good ancestor? What does it mean to be a good ancestor? Is it just being a good ancestor because there is a bloodline or an energy line? Right? It's like, I think it could be both, right? I think it could be both.
And tapping into the knowledge of your ancestors, like now, can give you even more power of what you're capable of doing on earth now, right?
Right.
And think about it. For me, when I'm doing energy work and things like that, and I'm meditating and praying, I call on my well ancestors. So I would like to be one of the ancestors that my child calls on or somebody else calls on. So trying to do right and be right, is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. There's a time to battle.
Right.
Just because you set boundaries and just because you're trying to be this well ancestor, you don't have to be white light. If there's something that needs to be said, say it. If something is being wrong, right? I'm not saying give up the ability to fight for what's right and for people, because that's being a part of a good ancestor too. Like, I'm not going to tolerate that. That's why we have like Black Lives Matter marches and things like that, because we're trying to shift the energy around ancestors and setting boundaries and being a good advocate. So guess what? Our kids can call on us later and be like, I remember when mom was in that Black Lives Matter march. And now this year, 20 years down the road, this march has happened. Prayerfully, that won't be, right?
Yeah.
Like, hopefully 20 years from now, our kids won't be having marches about social justice and equality,
Right.
But if so, call on me as a good ancestor. Well, 20 years from now, I still want to be walking. All right, Dad?
Yeah.
But maybe like 100 years from now, I can be a good ancestor,
Right, exactly. And the impact that we have on individuals. And I feel that's why it's so critical when I talk about aloha, right? It's like talking about aloha. It's like a lot of times we feel that, aloha means a lot of things. It means hello and goodbye and love and compassion and empathy and grace. But when we look at aloha as alo, forward facing, and ha, breath of life, right? It's like, what And our words is carried through our breath. What words are we leaving behind? How powerful are our words? It's like, being that both of us have our PhDs, we wrote a lot. We did a lot. There's a lot of research out there that we've done.
Yeah.
Right. And people will look us up. They'd be able to look up our dissertations and see the words that we've said. And then it's like, that will, it's like, what did we put out there into the universe that other people will be able to pick up, where they're going to be like, whoa, they were good ancestors, because this is the written things that they left behind. Mm-hmm. And so even though we all die, when we become ancestors, we still live on. So again, going back to what you were saying in the beginning, we walk alongside death, but it is not something that is gone forever. We are still connected. We just went right. We just brought it right back around, Sonya, right back around. So yes, we are all still connected, even when we are no longer here.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that, individuals who are listening to, this episode of the podcast, they don't fear death like we've done before, but knowing that we're walking alongside death, and be able to talk about it and normalize it.
Yeah. Talk about it and normalize it, and take the perspective to think about how many of us fear living. Mm-hmm. So now we're really stuck if we're fear living and we're fear dying, like we are just stuck, right? And so live life to the fullest. I remember years ago when my uncle passed, the one that I told you, like I knew I wouldn't see him again. I had a dream that I had went to the hospital to see him, right? And I'm like, where is he? They were like, oh, he's here behind that curtain. And I moved the curtain back. And I remember this dream so vividly. At the white sheeted bed, there was a little baby boy at the bottom. And I jumped in my dream, and he said, see, Sonya, after life comes death, live life to the fullest. And I woke up and I was like, ooh, okay. And that was after he passed away. And I was not supposed to have children. And so my child is a surprise baby, right? And so I remember years later, when he was about 6 months old, I had him at the bottom of the bed, and I ran to go get something. And then I came back and I jumped, because there was this child, the same kind of setup of the dream that I had. And I was like, you know what? I told my uncle, big dude, hey, thank you. Now I see you were telling me I was going to be able to have a child, So like you were saying with dreams, spirit comes in. And so, we have to live, right? We can't live in fear of living and live in fear of dying, because then we're not living at all. Right?
Yeah.
That's really important.
I remember when, so it's been 11 years since my mom passed away. And I remember flying back to Hawaii, getting a phone call saying that my mom was in a hospital, and it was just a matter of time. And so my sister and I went, who lives here in Washington, we both got on a plane and we flew back to Hawaii, and we went to the hospital, and we were there for probably a day before she left. And it was funny because when we looked at my mom, it's as if, and my dad passed away probably I think it was 15, 16 years prior. So my mom was, by herself for a long time. But she had her eyebrows done. Her nails were all done. And her hair was cut. And we're like, she just did this a couple days ago. So did she know?
Mhm.
Did she know that she was going to be reunited with my dad again?
Yep.
And it was, there's 6 of us, and we all knew that it was time to tell our mom bye. That it was like, all right, mom, we will see you again soon. But my younger sister wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to let go. She's like, no, I'm not doing it. I can't. She finally got to the point where she wanted to have some alone time with our mom. And so she was in there and she was having a conversation with our mom. And she called us in. My sister called us in, and we were all gathering around my mom. And she told my mom, it's okay now. It's okay. You can go. And at that moment, her heart stopped. And the 6 of us could feel it, Sonya. We could feel it when she's like, I'm not here on this earth anymore. And we all could feel it.
Yeah.
And it's like it was such a beautiful moment, because my sister was like, it's okay. And it's like my mom held on until all 6 of her kids told her that we were going to be okay without her here. And that was beautiful. And I understand that not everyone experiences that, but that was my experience with the death, the ending of my mom leaving the vessel and being forever, right?
Right.
It's like she ended time here on this earth, but she's still here forever.
Yes.
With
Yes.
all of us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we end our conversation?
Yeah. How about years ago, a few years back, I wrote this poem. Well, actually, I have like maybe 2 poems that I would like to end it with, right? Because I write poems. That's my little thing. So hold on, I got to pull up one of them on my computer. For my death doula certification, because we have to talk about a lot of stuff and reflect on a lot of things. For me, I can't write and journal sometimes. I mean, I can, but then I end up just having this download of information that comes in poems. And so I'm always writing poems. And so for my death doula class, I wrote this because we had to write about something. And I was like, y'all, I can't write today, but this poem came. So I'm going to read this first one, and it's called Little Small Deaths. Every passing moment, we experience a small death, ones that make us pause and go into self-reflective depth, ones that course a map of discovery that hopefully lead to self-awareness and recovery. A noted time to take a daily pause to see if we stand for the importance of a cause. Working through the tracks of time, relooking at our trajectory line. How do we end up where we are? How do we release the hidden scars? Knowing that each moment in time is a precious gift, that in life there is grief, and then we relive. Those moments of laughter, tears, and joy until another moment closes and we walk through another door. How do we maneuver through this roller coaster called life and still find ways to have peace of mind? All I can guess is that we keep walking forward to that place that was set before us, where ancestors greet and toast because each lineage progresses most, towards the dreams laid from our past until this life ends in our last breath, in our breath, our last. So that was one. And So this one that I wrote a while ago because I had a really close friend passed away and I just couldn't process like what happened and why. And because we had this pact, if anything, you need anything, you call me, right? And so that person needed me and just didn't call. So it still hurts me a little bit, right? In death, we cry, we mourn, we live, but it's okay, right? And grieving can hit any time. 10 years down the road, 10 days from now, like, so there's no time limit. And that's one thing people should realize, there's no time limit. So this one is called When He Comes to the Door. People don't know how to handle death. They don't know what to say. Their hearts send you love, but they just walk away. It's a scary thought, the least, but it's a place where we need to find peace. It's a returning of home we'll all know, but hopefully when we're gray and old. Hopefully when we have danced, when we've known love and held hands. Hopefully when we have laughed until it hurts, until they bury us in Mother Earth. Hopefully our soul knew joy and peace, and sorrow and demons were released. Then when we see death's face, we can pause and retrace the joys, the fun, the way we were. No regrets, no unlived dreams for sure. Because sometimes death comes as a surprise, even though we have an allotted time. Because maybe we played and toiled at his door, and he understands and plays no more. So take each day to praise the smiles, the rain, the sun's rays. Tell people you love them and care. Rid yourself of weight, possessions, just share. Because when friends and families die, you're not left here to cry over their unlived dreams and what they could be, because you know they lived happy and free. So I understand when people are faced with death, they tend to fade away briefly because they're pleading with the unknown to give them more time and room, more time to do what they want to do, to be what they want to be. Because we all want to grow old, have gray hair, see our grandchildren, and be free. So when he knocks at our door and we see his face, we leave this adventure called life full of grace. So
Those were beautiful poems.
thank you. So it doesn't scare me so much about death when I sit and write about it. I feel like death is like going, oh, can you like tell me, like tell people a little bit about me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's changing the narrative of how we've been conditioned to see death.
Yeah.
That it does not have to be a scary thing, and it's okay to, when it does come, it's okay to like, oh, now I have a different way of looking at death. And so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just your life with how you've navigated this space that could be so unknown and so scary for individuals, and brought in some light and some life into it.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure. I mean, it's been a pleasure. And
oh, absolutely. Thank you for decolonizing death with me.
I'm going to steal that just to let you know. I am a decolonizer of death. I'm seriously, when you see my next business card, no joke.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everyone, you've been listening to the Evolution of Aloha podcast, a Plowline production. Tune in for upcoming episodes with amazing people. And don't forget to subscribe to the Evolution of Aloha and Plowline podcast, available on all your popular podcast platforms. Again, this is the Evolution of Podcasts. I am Jerry Balarosa Tennell. You're able to actually have a non-edited video content for members on Patreon. So please help us continue this work by becoming a supporter, and head over to patreon.com/Plowline Productions. So until next time, we'll talk story. Please take care of yourselves and each other. So aloha, everyone, and mahalo. Thank you so much, Sonya, for being here with us.
Oh, aloha. Oh, wait, isn't today your birthday?
Tomorrow's my birthday.
Okay, so tomorrow's Jerry's birthday, y'all. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Have a very good birthday.
Thank you so much. All right, let me stop recording.